prehistoric Sweden before AD 800 was a land rich with petroglyphs, especially concentrated in the province of Bohuslän and the northern part of the county of Kalmar, also known as Tjust. The earliest images, dating back to around 5000 BC, are found in the province of Jämtland. These ancient carvings depict wild animals such as elk, reindeer, bears, and seals. The period from 2300 to 500 BC marks the most intensive carving period, featuring images of agriculture, warfare, ships, and domesticated animals. Interestingly, petroglyphs from 800 to 500 BC in Bohuslän also show similar themes. Next is the Viking period and Middle Ages from 800 to 1500 AD. During these centuries, Swedes were known as merchant seamen engaged in far-reaching trade. By the 11th and 12th centuries, Sweden had become a unified Christian kingdom, which later included Finland. Initially, the kings of Uppsala ruled most of modern Sweden, with the southern and western coastal regions under Danish rule until the 17th century. Post a century of civil wars, a new royal family emerged, strengthening the crown's power at the expense of the nobility, in exchange for military service privileges like tax exemption. Unlike many European countries, Sweden never had a fully developed feudal system, and its peasants were never reduced to serfdom. The Vikings from Sweden participated in raids across Europe, but primarily travelled east towards Russia, Constantinople, and the Muslim world, known as Serkland. The 9th century saw extensive Scandinavian settlements on the east side of the Baltic Sea. The conversion from Norse paganism to Christianity was gradual and sometimes violent, with significant early religious influences from England and later dominant German influences, especially post the Norman conquest of England. Notably, around the year 1000, Olaf Skotkonung was the first known king to rule both Svealand and Gotland. The 12th century was marked by dynastic struggles, notably between the Erik and Sverker clans, with regional divisions supporting different dynasties. This division ended when the Bjelbo dynasty, emerging from a marriage into the Erik clan, consolidated Sweden into a strong state. By 1319, Sweden and Norway were united under King Magnus. In 1332, following the death of the Danish king Christopher II, King Magnus expanded Swedish control over eastern Danish provinces and other territories, sparking ongoing tensions with Russian states. Next, we will look into early modern Sweden from 1523 to 1611 AD. In the 16th century, Gustav Vasa fought for an independent Sweden, successfully crushing attempts to restore the Union of Kalmar and establishing the foundation for modern Sweden. He also broke away from the papacy, establishing the Lutheran Church. The final disintegration of the Union led to prolonged rivalries with Norway and Denmark. Gustavus Vasa overthrew the Danish king Christian II, supported by Catholic bishops, and was crowned King Gustavus I in 1523. In 1527, he persuaded the Riksdag of Västerås to confiscate church lands, which comprised 21% of the farmland, establishing his control over the church and initiating significant tax reforms that standardized and simplified taxes, leading to increased crown tax revenues and perceived fairness in taxation. A war in 1535 against Lübeck expelled Hanseatic monopoly traders, boosting Sweden's economic strength as local businessmen took over foreign trade. By 1544, Gustavus controlled 60% of the farmlands in Sweden, building the first modern army in Europe, supported by a sophisticated tax system and government bureaucracy. He also proclaimed the Swedish crown hereditary, establishing the House of Vasa's rule, which lasted until 1654. The rise as a great power. During the 16th and 17th centuries saw Swedish kings demanding increasing taxes and military conscription, focusing on defensive needs, yet often used for offensive warfare. Particularly from 1655 to 1660, when threats of invasion were imminent, King Charles X, Gustav, urged the populace to contribute more to their own defences. This period marked a balance that supported an aggressive foreign policy. After successful wars against Denmark, Russia and Poland, Sweden emerged as a great power, controlling the Baltic region, Europe's main source of grain, iron, copper, timber, tar, hemp and furs. Sweden first gained a foothold outside its traditional provinces in 1561, when Estonia opted for vassalage during the Livonian War. Despite ceding territories like Ingria and Kexholm to Russia in 1590, Sweden expanded in the eastern Baltic in subsequent years. During the Polish, Swedish and Russo-Swedish Ingrian Wars, Gustavus Adolphus retook key territories formalized in treaties like Stolbovo and Altmark. Sweden's significant role in the 30 Years' War shifted the political and religious balance in Europe, leading to acquisitions formalized in the Treaty of Bromsebro and the Peace of Westphalia, ultimately securing dominions like Bremen-Verden, Wismar and Swedish Pomerania. From 1638, Sweden also held the colony of New Sweden along the Delaware River in North America. Between the years 1648 and 1721, Sweden emerged as a formidable power in Europe. In 1655, during the Second Northern War, Charles X, Gustav of Sweden, boldly invaded and occupied western Poland, Lithuania, while the eastern half was already under Russian control. This rapid Swedish advance became infamously known in Poland as the Swedish Deluge. As a result, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was transformed into a Swedish fief. The Polish-Lithuanian regular armies surrendered, and Polish King John II Casimir Vasa was forced to flee to the Habsburgs. The Deluge, lasting for 5 years, inflicted severe damages on Poland and Lithuania. Some historians believe this invasion marked the beginning of the downfall of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The countries were devastated, treasures were stolen, and an insurmountable loss of lives occurred. Through strategic maneuvers, Sweden was able to establish control over the eastern bank of the Sound, which was formalized in the Treaty of Roskilde in 1658. Furthermore, the Treaty of Oliva in 1660 recognized Sweden's southeastern dominions by the European great powers, although Sweden was barred from further expansion along the southern coast of the Baltic. Despite these territorial gains, Sweden came out of the Scanian War with only minor losses, largely because France intervened, forcing Sweden's adversaries into the treaties of Fontainebleau and Saint-Germain, both in 1679. The subsequent period of peace allowed Charles VI of Sweden to implement significant reforms and stabilize the realm. He consolidated the finances of the crown through the Great Reduction of 1680 and initiated further changes in finance, commerce, national maritime and land armaments, judicial procedure, church government and education. The Great Northern War began in 1700, as Russia, Saxony, Poland and Denmark-Norway pooled their power and attacked the Swedish Empire. The young Swedish king, Charles XIV, despite his spectacular early victories, most notably against the Russians at the Battle of Narva, harbored too ambitious a plan to attack Moscow and force Russia into peace. His strategy failed when the Russians won decisively at the Battle of Poltava in June 1709, capturing much of the exhausted Swedish army. Charles IV and the remnants of his army were cut off from Sweden and fled south into Ottoman territory, where he stayed for 3 years. His refusal to leave until the Ottoman Empire joined him in a new war against Tsar Peter V of Russia led to an overstayed welcome. Despite establishing a powerful political network in Constantinople, including the mother of the Sultan, Charles's persistence only worked to a point. The Ottomans checked Peter's army but failed to pursue the victory, which enraged Charles, souring his relations with the Ottoman administration. Meanwhile, his troops' behavior in Moldavia turned disastrous, lacking discipline and showing contempt for the locals, leading to destruction and chaos. Back in the north, Sweden faced invasions by its enemies. Charles returned home in 1714, too late to restore his lost empire and impoverished homeland. He died in 1718, and in the subsequent peace treaties, the Allied powers, now including Russia and Great Britain Hanover, ended Sweden's era as a great power. During the Enlightenment, Sweden embraced the cultural movements of the arts, architecture, science and learning. A groundbreaking law in 1766 established the principle of freedom of the press, marking a significant step towards liberty of political opinion. The Academy of Science was founded in 1739 and the Academy of Letters, History and Antiquities in 1753. Carl Linnaeus emerged as a cultural leader, his work in biology and ethnography profoundly influencing European science. However, this period of parliamentary dominance was soon challenged by the monarchy. King Gustav III ascended the throne in 1771 and, with French support, led a coup d'état in 1772, establishing himself as an enlightened despot. His reign marked the end of the age of freedom and party politics. Gustav III was a patron of the arts and music, and his reforms improved bureaucracy, currency, trade and defence. Despite these advancements, Sweden faced a growing social problem with rampant alcoholism. Gustav III promoted major social reforms, weakening the nobility and seeking support from the middle classes against them. Despite his personal distaste for the French Revolution, he pursued anti-feudal reforms to strengthen his position. His war against Russia ended poorly, and he was assassinated by nobles upset over his attempts to curtail their privileges for the benefit of the peasants. The Gustavian era, spanning from 1772 to 1809, featured Kings Gustav III and Gustav IV, and King Charles XIII. The significant event of this era was the loss of Finland to Russia in 1809, making Finland a Grand Duchy under the Tsar's rule, though not strictly part of Russia. Post the Swedish coup d'état in 1809, Sweden leaned towards Napoleon-friendly policies despite humanitarian aid from England. In 1810, French Marshal Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte was elected Charles XIV John of Sweden, bringing with him a background of revolutionary principles. His leadership saw Sweden joining the coalition against Napoleon in 1813, and after defeating the Danes at Borneved, the Treaty of Kiel transferred mainland Norway to Sweden. However, Norway declared independence, leading to a brief conflict resolved by a personal union, though Norway largely maintained its independence, especially in foreign affairs. Charles XIV's reign also marked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Sweden, focusing on rural forges, textile proto-industries and sawmills. Despite initial popularity, his reign faced challenges, notably the Rabulist riots in 1838 following the lèse-majesté conviction of journalist Magnus Jacob Krusenstolp. The century also saw the rise of a liberal opposition press, abolition of trade guild monopolies and significant reforms in taxation, voting and national military service, shaping Sweden's modern political landscape. Between the 1860s and 1910, Sweden underwent a transformation akin to that of Japan, evolving from a stagnant rural society into a vibrant industrial one. The shift in agriculture from communal villages to more efficient private farms reduced the need for manual labour, prompting a significant migration to cities and 1 million Swedes to emigrate to the United States between 1850 and 1890. Many of these emigrants returned, bringing with them tales of higher productivity in American industry, which spurred faster modernization in Sweden. In 1873, Sweden and Denmark established the Scandinavian Monetary Union, further integrating their economies.